The contacts feature in Denari can serve two functions, both at the same time when needed. First, it can be a simple to-do list type application related to your donors. You can create a task, assign that task to a Denari user, set a scheduled date, and review to verify that the task has been completed. Second, it can be a place to record contacts like phone calls, emails sent, etc., and store them for future reference. We'll start by taking a look at how you might use contacts to schedule tasks. We'll look first at a contact record and then back up to look at how we set up some of its elements. First, we'll go to the name record. So we'll go to the Donors tab, Name List Management, and we'll just select a record here. Now we'll go to Other Pages and then Contacts. Here we see a list of all the contact records that have been created for this donor. We'll click one, but if you wanted to create a new one, you could click Add New at the top. Let's look first at the description field. Here you can put anything you want. You can enter phone call, email, banquet follow-up call, whatever tells you what this record is about. Across from that is the scheduled date, which is fairly self-explanatory. That is the date that you want to complete the activity. The resource is the person who will or who has completed the task. This person must have a user record in Denari. We'll look at where you set those up in a few minutes. Schedule type is another field that you will create value for. They are usually things like phone call, email, etc. This next section is called Link and Sync Microsoft Outlook Synchronization Fields. There's an add-on module for Denari called Link and Sync that allows you to sync your contact data with Outlook. You can see by the field names, if you are familiar with Outlook, that they are Outlook type fields. What you enter into these fields can be synced directly into your Outlook contact records. The Q for Label checkbox field allows you to set this record up to have a mailing label printed. You may work on several records throughout the day, then at the end of the day print labels for all of those with boxes checked. Denari will create them in an Avery 5160 format and then uncheck this box so that you don't have to go back and manually uncheck them all. The Notes field can be used for several things, which we'll look at in more detail later. Now, let's back up. First, let's look at Scheduled Types. We'll go to the Contacts tab and then Scheduled Types. A scheduled type is an activity. We'll look at shortly how to set up a bunch of tasks to do as a group, and scheduled types are an important part of that process. To use our example from earlier, let's say you did a fundraising event and want to follow up with a phone call in 10 days. First, you'll create the scheduled type by clicking Add New here. You'll give the record a code, just like you would any record you create in Denari, and then give it a description. So in this case, it might be banquet follow-up. We'll select a type, and then in the default text field, we can put several different kinds of things. If you were making a phone call, you might jot down 3 things that you want to cover in the phone call as a reminder to yourself. In this letter, you would type the entire letter here, and we'll see why later. Remember, we're going to assign this task or scheduled type to a number of name records at the same time. And then finally, we'll save the record. Now we need to set up our resources, the people who will be assigned to specific contact items. Again, we go to the Contacts tab and then click on Schedule Resources. We'll click Add New to create a new one, but I'm just going to click on one that's already here. Enter the person's name, select their user record from the drop-down, and check the active checkbox if it's not already checked. As we said earlier, the resource must have a user record in Denari or be able to log into Denari. And now we're ready to begin using contacts. There are 3 ways that contacts can be used, with the final result being a record of the contact with the name record. First, we'll look at as a to-do list. To make this easier to follow, let's imagine that we just finished a fundraising event like a golf tournament, and we want to follow up by sending a letter to each of the golfers. You could, of course, adapt this to any scenario. Earlier, as the golfers were signing up, we assigned a classifications to each of them so that we can easily get a list when needed. Now we're ready to schedule that follow-up letter. We need to first set up a scheduled type following the steps we discussed earlier. In the scheduled type setup, as we will type the body of the letter. Now we can schedule the follow-up. First, we'll create a name segment that identifies the golfers using the classification that we've assigned to each of them. If you need help with name segmenter, you can check out the videos on that topic. Now, go to the Contacts tab and then Mass Schedule. In this first field, the name segment field, we'll select that name segment that identifies the golfers. In the scheduled type field, we'll select the golf follow-up record that we created earlier that contains the body of the letter. And now we'll enter a scheduled date. That's the date that we want the task to be completed, and then select a resource, the person that will complete the task. Finally, we can mark the items as opened or closed as we are creating them. In this case, we want them to be open so that we can close them as we complete each task. But there are some occasions when you just want to make a record of a contact in mass, but there's no task to complete. So you could mark them complete as you create the record. When we click the Make Schedule Item Entries button, Denari will create a record in each golfer's name record. When the person or resource that these tasks have been assigned to comes in each morning, they should go to the Contacts tab. Here, they'll see a list of all the items that are scheduled for today. They can click on an item in the list and it will be opened. Since this is a letter, they can click the Get Default Notes button down here at the bottom, which I'll do, and it fills in the notes field with the body of the letter. Now we can click the Print Letter button at the top of the page, and Denari will produce an 8.5 by 11 letter in your inbox that you can then print out and drop in the mail. Of course, you could do the same thing with phone calls or emails, etc. Now click the Completed checkbox and hit Save and return to the list to continue today's tasks. You can also filter this page by date if you want to work on items from a date other than today. Just select the date and then click on Get Schedule. The second way that contacts can be used is to provide storage for individual contacts. Let's say that you're calling or emailing major donors and want a record of your contacts. Just before making that phone call, open the donor's name record. We'll go to Other Pages and then Contacts, and then Add New. Here you can enter a description. So in this case, you might just put phone call or follow-up phone call. We'll enter a scheduled date, which is the date of the call, the resource, the person making the call, and if needed, you could select a schedule type that contains the items that you want to remind yourself of while on the call. After selecting the scheduled type, click on Get Default Notes button just to pull those items into the notes field as we did earlier with the letter. While on the call, you could click the date and time stamp to enter that into the field. Then make notes as needed. When the call is finished, click the Completed checkbox at the top of the page and save the record. You now have a record of the phone call. If you were sending an email, you could copy and paste the body of the email into the notes field as a reminder of what was sent. And that brings us to the third way that contacts are used. That is as a record for emails sent from Denari. There are two ways to do this, as mass email and as single emails. For more detailed information about this, you can check out the video about sending emails. The result is that a contact record is creating for each email sent through Denari, which of course provides a record of the contact. Now, back on the Contacts tab, there are some links that we should check out. The first one we see is Labels for Queued Items. You may remember that when we discussed the setup of contact records, we saw the Queue for Label checkbox. When you run this routine and leave all the fields blank, Denari will go and find all the contact records that have the box checked and produce mailing labels in the Avery 5160 format for the name records linked to those contact records. It will also then uncheck the box to set it up to run again. If you want to filter the labels somewhat, you can use the department code field and the user code field shown here. There are 3 reports available. Let's go back to the Contacts tab. The first one is called Scheduled Call Log Report. Let me move just a little bit for you. This report produces a list of scheduled items and can be filtered by resource, type, and target date. If you want to print this report, just click the Make PDF link at the top of the page. The second report is the Scheduled Call Log Summary, and it looks like this. This is more of a management type report and can be filtered by target date. Again, you can print this by clicking the PDF link at the top of the page. And then the third report is all open items, and I'll scroll down a little bit for you here. It can be filtered by open, closed, scheduled date, resource, and schedule type. Clicking one of the items on the page will cause that contract record to be open, and you could perform the task and mark it completed from here, or you could print this by using your browser's print functions. Now back on the Contacts page, we want to look at the Reminders link. This shows a list of all open items. This is similar to the View All Open Items report we just talked about. You can filter the fields at the top just like filtering on name records, and it does offer you a few more options for filtering than the report does. To change the contents of this list, you could also work the list, so to speak, just by clicking on one of the items, finish the task, mark it completed, click Save, and then click the Lookup button to return back to the list. The big value in using the Contacts feature in Denari is that it provides a record of contacts made with each donor. You may find that you only want this for some of your donors, or you may want to keep those records for all of your donors. There's no limit to the number of contact records that you can create. If you have any questions about this feature, please contact our tech support office through the support button at the top of the Denari page.